This is part 5.6 of the Killer Food Plots food plot series. Today we're talking about the Killer Food Plot Resurrection Clover. The Killer Food Plot Resurrection Clover is a staple in every Killer Food Plot habitat management plan. Why? Protein is so important in the diet of your whitetail. From your does that are creating your next generation of buck and doe fawns, that lactation cycle, the recovery of their body, included is your bucks in that recovery in the early spring and summer. They're trying to get their body back to functioning in a healthy, consistent manner so that they can start to put those inches on that rack. Resurrection Clover contains 6 different clovers. They complement one another in the ground. They produce different levels of protein at different times. The particular species complement each other in the soil, producing a highly available, highly digestible food source from early spring all the way to the fall. So when do you plant the Resurrection Clover? The great thing about the Resurrection Clover is it can be frost seeded. It has a hard seed rating, which means it can be broadcast out over an existing seedbed area, ideally following a brassica, which has choked out most of the grass and weed competition. It can also be planted in early spring and summer. You want to avoid trying to plant clover in the middle of the summer, but then resume again in early fall. Establishing that fall stand will allow you to get ahead of or beyond the grass and weed competition so that you have a solid, high protein food source going into the primary hunting season, as well as the regenerative high protein food that following spring. So how do you plant the Resurrection Clover? Well, there's a lot of different ways to introduce Resurrection Clover into your food plot regimen. Killer Food Plots, Climatize, and some of the other annual seed blends, you can add Resurrection Clover in when you plant those. You can also broadcast it over an existing, say for instance, a hayfield area to incorporate a food source where you can't necessarily work the ground. The Resurrection Clover can be planted solely by itself, or it can also be combined with other Killer Food Plot perennials like the KFP chicory. That's one of my favorite blends to mix together to produce high protein, and those two actually complement each other in the soil. The chicory, KFP chicory, shields the clover when it's young and it gets extremely high temperatures, and the clover repays that chicory by producing a high level of free nitrogen, feeding that chicory through the root system. Why would you want to use the Killer Food Plot Resurrection Clover in your program? Because it produces results. So how do you plant the Resurrection Clover as an existing standalone food plot? Well, very important that after you've disked or rototilled that soil, or if you've dragged it and you've created some fluffy effect so that you don't want the seed to sink in, we want to go back over and drag or smooth out the seed bed, reducing or firming up the seed bed. Otherwise, another step you can take is you can run a roller or a cultipacker, one pass, to stabilize and firm up the seed bed, broadcast the Resurrection Clover out over your food plot area, and then re-roll or re-cultipack, setting the seed down into the soil, pressing it in so that you get the optimal germination